seen it? Yeah, how you doing? I'm going to show you from the Sunday World newspaper. I'm just sharing a story about you here gambling and all that sort of stuff. Do your followers know that you're gambling there? What does Jesus say about gambling? Are you using money that people donate to you to gamble away? No? You don't say anything about it?
I don't want to buy nothing once or twice.
Once or twice, yeah. You see people in your phones who've been here for thousands at a time.
What?
Yeah, thousands at a time. Yeah.
Please don't go down that road.
Well, it's just, you know yourself, was it Jesus himself who said that you can't serve two masters, money and God? And which master would you serve?
No, I didn't.
Would be money or God?
No.
You don't want to talk about it? No, is it?
What's the problem?
Well, it's just, I'm just asking Christina about her followers know that she gambles in the casino all the time. I've had people who told me from here gambling thousands of euros at a time.
No.
And you've been down here a lot of times.
No.
A lot of people have said. It just seems very unusual, you know, with all the money coming from the house of prayer, you're here gambling.
Open the door.
Like they're big money machines out there, aren't they? You don't want to say anything about it, no?
So that's a video of a woman some of our listeners and viewers mightn't know about. Her name is Christina Gallagher. Of course, we know about her because she's been knocking around the pages of the Sunday World for a few decades. But what were you doing going in to that casino and approaching her as she was on the slots? What's the significance of that? And then we'll go back to the background of her.
Yeah, the significance of Christina Gallagher would be she opened a house of prayer in Achill Island back in the 1990s and 93. She claimed to be a visionary. She's speaking to Jesus. She claimed to have stigmata. Initially, the church would have been supportive of what she was doing, but I think early on, the church got a little bit worried about what was happening there. It started becoming a bit of a shrine.
Right.
A lot of people were coming to see the woman who speaks to Mary.
Okay.
Who claims to speak to Mary. Obviously, she developed that on. She now claims to speak to Jesus. There'd be a lot of devotion to Christina. She would have built a big following and people would have described it as a cult.
Right.
She'd deny it. But
yeah.
The big thing, I suppose, about what the significance of the slots would be, Christina, is she would have raised a lot of money through donations for the House of Prayer over the year. And that's a massive factor in the House of Prayer story.
For sure. And we have a number of times questioned, you know, that money, where it's gone, what it's been used for, and if there was been any tax paid on it, of course, because is it a registered charity? We'll get to all that. First of all, the slots are in existence where?
The slots, these particular, they're in existence in a lot of places, but this particular slot machine was in Dr. Quirkey's in Phibsborough in Dublin.
Right.
It's a host of slot machines there. And yeah, that's where they were.
So in my day, showing my age now here, but you used to have like a handful of copper change and 10p's and 20s and old sort of pound money. Pences, weren't they? The pences.
Yes,
the struggle there for a second.
The tuppennies and the halfpennies.
But anyway, you'd put them in, and if you won, you would just get this, like, you know, vomit of coins, which then were worthless, really, you know, in the long run. But there's bigger money going into the slots nowadays.
It's a lot bigger, yeah. It's not your 2p's and your 1p's going in. People who are down where Christina was doing her gambling down there, and she would have been down there a bit according to the people. Now, she said she'd been there once or twice, but the people in that casino who were watching her said she'd be sitting there with bundles of 50 euro notes, and she'd pump them into the machine over the course of whatever length of time.
A few hours or whatever.
Yeah, I think an hour, maybe 2 hours at a time. They claim she was spending big amounts in the night on it. She claims she wasn't.
Do they serve a beer?
They don't.
It's not like Vegas.
Yeah, tea or coffee.
Tea or coffee.
Maybe some water.
An Irish version of the Vegas slots.
It's not like Monaco or Monte Carlo or anything like that. No.
Amazing.
It's a little low.
So what did she got to say to you? Was she surprised?
She was surprised, yeah. She got a bit of a jump, I think, when she saw me, and I told her it was from the Sunday World. So she was playing away happily in her slot machine when I came in. She seemed happy. She's pressing the buttons away. When I told her where I was from and who I was, she immediately grabbed her bag.
Yeah.
She also, funnily enough, she had 2 winning dockets on the thing. She was quick enough to grab them, shoved them very quickly into her coat pocket and started making a beeline. I thought initially towards the front door, but she was going to collect a friend of hers who was also there with her gambling.
Okay. and they went off into the night. And yet again, she does that if she's ever approached over the years. She doesn't engage, certainly with media.
She doesn't know. The only difference this time, I'm surprised with Christina, was she actually did say a couple of things to me. So when I asked her if her followers knew she was down here a lot of times, according to the other people in the casino, gambling away, she said, I only come the odd time.
Right.
I only come once or twice. Now, people in the casino say that's not true, and she's been coming regularly for over a year. Sometimes a few times a week, they claimed, and sometimes once a week, generally midweek on a Wednesday.
But it's just not the sort of place you expect to find this visionary and this woman who has sort of based herself in a corner of Ireland for many years and has made a really healthy business out of what she is. Which I think for younger readers, we have to go back a little bit to the 1980s in Ireland, which was such a different place than it is now. It was so Catholic, so religious. In Ballinasspittle in County Cork in July 1985, somebody claimed to have seen a roadside statue of the Virgin Mary move spontaneously. And that was the start of what became known as the moving statues. There were occurrences reported afterwards in County Waterford and in other places around the country. And it was almost this kind of, I do even remember it as a child watching it on the news, and people in communities would gather around these sort of roadside shrines, and somebody would go, oh, it moved. And then everybody would be down on their hands and knees praying. And this was a religious site and a sacred place. And people were claiming that they were able to speak to the Virgin Mary, and there was tears in a few of the statue's eyes and all the rest of it. I mean, it went on a good while, because I was just telling you before we came on, certainly in the 90s at some point, I remember being sent on a story to Donegal where what turned out the headline of the story was, "We've seen the flying crosses." I think I have a copy of it actually at home. But I went on this mental trip up to Donegal. The roads were really bad. I was in a really shit car. My phone and the phone service was bad anyway. And I had no phone service for most of the kind of the journey through Donegal to meet this group of people, a large group of people who stood in a field and claimed that these crosses started flying over their heads at a certain point of the day. And they were absolutely all sorts of professionals, totally normal people. And they were just convinced that they had seen this apparition. There has to be something to it psychologically with groups and suggestive stuff and all the rest of it.
There must be. Well, if you remember, it's going a little off topic, but when Larry Murphy got out of prison, how many people thought they'd seen him everywhere?
Saw him everywhere, didn't they?
Then when we'd get phone calls, myself and yourself, Nicola, from people saying, oh, we've seen him. But then when you'd inquire into it, it'd be, oh, actually, it was my cousin seen him.
Yes.
And, okay, can I talk to your cousin? You talk to the cousin, and then it's like, well, actually, no, it was my friend seeing him.
Yeah, nobody really saw.
And so forth. I think, maybe perhaps the same thing with flying crosses.
Kind of
someone tells you they've seen them. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to maybe jump in and say, well, yeah, I seen it too.
This is it. But it was it was a different Ireland. It was very religious, very Catholic, and people were, going to confessions. They were going to mass still in their droves on a Sunday. That whole Catholic culture was really embedded, and I suppose particularly in rural Ireland. So in the midst of all this, in County Mayo, up pops essentially a housewife. I don't think that word is really used that much anymore, but that's what she was, called Christina Gallagher, who she must have started somewhere, and she kind of claimed that she was bleeding in the palms of her hands.
Stigmata. Yeah. She claimed to have stigmata, and she claimed, I think as far back as the late 80s, she would have claimed that she was having visions of the Virgin Mary and speaking to her, had stigmata, claimed she had these wounds, the same wounds that Christ supposedly had from the crucifixion, and was putting herself forward as this very special person who had this direct connection to Jesus and to the Virgin Mary.
And as you mentioned there in the beginning, initially she was kind of accepted by the Catholic Church, or her claims were she was seen as this spiritual person who could gather people to prayer.
Yeah, well, her claims, the Catholic Church would have looked into. So if you kind of fast forward from the late 80s into 93, she set up the House of Prayer. The Archbishop at the time actually, gave his blessing on it within certain guidelines. It was supposed to be a place of retreat. It was supposed to be a low-key kind of place where people could come, say, decades of the Rosary, where priests could go and have some quiet contemplation. She had different ideas for it. And I think some people within the Catholic Church would say that she misled the Archbishop into thinking what the House of Prayer was actually going to be. Very soon after, within 2 weeks of it opening and the Bishop giving his blessing to it, he was writing to her, trying to rein it in, giving out about certain aspects of what was happening there. I think it became clear it was becoming a bit of a shrine.
Or a bit of a circus?
Yeah.
Well, we'd say that now maybe, but I suppose...
I think a lot of people would probably say that, yes. Yeah, and I think that would have been the fear that, you're underplaying a percent. It's becoming
So she was almost like theatrical.
Yeah, well, like you're talking about a woman who's claiming to receive messages from Jesus, from Mary, who has a direct line to them and is speaking directly through them and has a message to tell.
And people are gathering in this house, which was essentially a bungalow, wasn't it? Was that right?
It was small at the start. I think she get it bigger as it went along. But,
probably.
Yeah.
So, and she was kind of performing. So she was going in and then it was like, if anybody has been sometimes to some of the gospel churches in the States, it's a little bit like that. A lot of wailing and a lot of kind of, the crowds are getting riled up, and she all of a sudden, there was one video of her, wasn't there, of collapsing because the messages were...
It's similar to that evangelical kind of type. She's not an evangelical, she's supposedly Catholic, but it's that type of performance, isn't it? It's like, this is the big show. Here we go. You've come to see this. I'm going to give it to you. I'll give you what you want. I'm going to do the big performance. You're going to see me say I'm suffering, or say that, the Lord's talking to me now, or all that sort of stuff.
So they came in their droves, and then it sort of started to emerge. We should say a former colleague of ours, Jim Gallagher, actually wrote a book called The House of Prayer?
Immaculate Deception.
Deception.
Jim Gallagher did a lot of exposing of Christina Gallagher's wealth.
He did a brilliant...
life of luxury, I suppose you call it, over the years.
And he sort of started to delve into it and realising that this just wasn't this stage show with people coming, but they were also being encouraged. There was no force in this. And this is where these stories are always a bit, you always wonder, how did those people give that much money? But they were sort of being encouraged to give money to the House of Prayer, which was set up at that point as, what was the money for, essentially?
Well, I suppose at that time they were saying it was to kind of further the House of Prayer and its teachings. They were telling people that we need this money to keep it going. This is really important. So people were giving over, some people gave over 100,000 in one go, 150,000 in one go. Like, over the years, it's taken in millions in donations. People have left large amounts in their wills. It wasn't small pocket change. This was big amounts of money. It wasn't just putting around the basket and getting, 100 quid to fix the leaky roof.
This was like
big money,
portion
big amounts,
of their life savings, essentially.
Sometimes it was their entire life savings.
On the basis that they were, ultimately, I suppose, and Jim has spoken to a few of the people, but at the time they sort of believed that they were doing good, giving to a really good cause, and probably ultimately that they were going to be saved when the day came that they went.
This is all factored in, actually.
Pearly gates.
That a lot of this would be, as well as furthering the House of Prayer, a lot of, the messages coming out of the House of Prayer would be that spend this money. There's an apocalypse coming. Jesus has told me the end of days is near. The only thing that'll give you protection is coming to the House of Prayer. If you donate, or if you buy the various items on the sale in the gift shop, including a €250 picture of Mary, which, according to Christina Gallagher, Jesus personally endorses. So it's got his backing, according to Christina. He came to her and told her, I endorse this product. He also apparently talked to her and said, when she was thinking of price increases on the $250 or euro picture, that if anyone gave out about it, Jesus said they won't get the protection that it'll offer.
Right.
So all these various things between the pictures or the donations, it's supposed to offer you protection from Jesus. And all the messages coming from the House of Prayer are that Jesus has said, if you do this, don't worry, you'll be saved. You keep going to the House of Prayer, keep donating the money. Apocalypse is coming, but you'll be all right.
And when the day comes. So she's all the while, I suppose, retreating further back into this secretive world, which is explained nearly because she's so religious and spiritual that, she can't be mixing with the public, and she's sort of, there's a circle around her, and it's not easy to get one-to-one with Christina Gallagher. She sort of comes on stage does not stage, because of course it's seen as a, it's this house of prayer place or whatever, but it's essentially like that. She's coming on, she's having these performances, she's getting these messages, she's sending out these messages, she's urging people to come to the house of prayer, donate, apocalypse is coming. And she retreats and retreats and retreats into this secretive world, which of course, Jim and others of us who have covered the story, we're starting to question that this secretive world is a bit of a glittering, gilded cage.
Yeah, for a supposedly devout woman, she was living quite an ostentatious life. And Jim did a great job. He exposed a lot of houses she was living in, the lifestyle she was leading. So he uncovered mansions that she was living, multi-million euro mansions that she was living in, dotted around the place. She had expensive places up in Mayo. She had a lovely house she was staying in Abington in Malahide, which was, at the time, there would have been celebrities living amongst the neighbours. There'd be Ronan Keating, Nicky Byrne, Robbie Keane, I think, at a house there. So she was living in opulence. Jim tracked down a 7-bedroom mansion in Shropshire in the UK, gated property that had a 7-person jacuzzi in it. And she was driving a 120 grand BMW car. I think when someone questioned the jacuzzi, the quote that they got back was, "Nothing is too good for Our Lady."
Okay. And she was kind of all the while, like, not spending as much time in Achill anymore in Mayo, and she was moving, and she starts to break into the US then. And she bought up properties in Florida and
different parts of the US. Yeah, they tried to expand, and they did expand indeed, with various different places in America. I think at one stage they were trying to get a place built in Texas, and were not demanding, but they were asking for money for that. And I think there was a quote at one stage that the Texas would be wiped out by a terrible weather event if this church wasn't built.
Wasn't funded.
Things like that. There's always a mix of, donate the money. Terrible events are coming. Something terrible will befall you unless this is done. So that always seemed to be the message behind it. It wasn't just a message of peace and love. It was a message of destruction. And she was always in
sort of communities that were particularly religious. Sort of that Achill into Donegal part of the country is a very spiritual part of the country. No explanation as to why. I just know that there's, even out of, if you look at Derry Airport, there's flights to the UK a couple of times a day, and the next most popular flight is to Lourdes. You know what I mean? It is still quite a religious part of the country. There was often a lot of spirituality up around Donegal and into Mayo. Same with parts of the states that she would have set up in. They would be places that were used to those big biblical churches, and everybody goes to church. Like, the States is amazingly religious. I always notice when I get them out there.
It's a bigger crowd, isn't it?
Yeah,
when you start to expand, you go, well, where's the bigger market?
Yeah, it's like the bands.
She had a market in Ireland, and she'd cornered that market, a particular section of that market.
And presumably part of England.
I presume so. I know she was in England a lot.
Yeah.
She certainly had property over there. I don't remember if she had a house of prayer in England. I can't remember, but certainly America, and definitely had properties in England that she was based in.
So, I mean, the last I kind of came across her, because there was a lot of stories been done, and like everything, it eventually sort of dies off, and you almost forget about her existence, even though she's working away and still money coming in. But the last I heard of her was around the 2014 mark, when I was doing something in Coldwater Lakes, which is out near City West, and was built by the Mansfield family as essentially an exclusive estate and a home for each of the Mansfield boys at the time. And Jim Mansfield Jr. had this huge, big house on Coldwater, one of the biggest, and it was totally surrounded by fencing. And I had been looking at the ownership of the properties, and it turned out that Christina Gallagher had bought that from Jim Mansfield Jr. It was this collision of two sort of characters that had spent quite a lot of time on the pages of the Sunday World. So she was there, but not often, not frequently, like it was one of her many houses or whatever. And really, until you rattled into the casino, I'd almost forgotten about her.
Yeah, the only time really she came up in a significant way since that kind of Coldwater Lake stuff that I can remember would be during COVID. It came up that there was some elderly people who were followers of her. Some of their relatives were on to me to say that they were getting this direction from Christina, basically saying that Jesus was speaking to her again, talking about COVID vaccines and saying if you get it, you'll get the mark of the beast.
Okay.
Which they were very much interpreting as, well, if I get this vaccine, I'll be going to hell.
Right.
And a lot of people were concerned, relatives of elderly, vulnerable people who were refusing to take the vaccine, saying, Christina said, this is what I'm taking from it. So they said that they wouldn't take the vaccine. These are elderly, vulnerable people. They would have been in the high-risk category. And some of them had said to the relatives that they've bought the picture for €250 of Mary and that'll protect them from COVID.
Instead of the vaccine. Yeah. You see, she was one of those, there was an awful lot of those that kind of came out, didn't they, from under their rock during COVID. A lot of kind of characters not unlike her, but extraordinary. And then to find her stuffing €50 notes into, I mean, for me, that was the ultimate moment in this story, which is not finished. And no doubt people who are listening to this, some people may know a little bit more about Christina Gallagher of late and what she's doing and where she's up to. So do contact us. You're social media, no doubt.
We're always willing to listen,
We're always willing to listen. We're always willing to listen to stories about Christina Gallagher. And it is quite a story. I mean, she's the stuff of movies, really. Netflix dramas,
well, someone said this week it was like something out of Father Ted. And I suppose the gambling in the casino and all that, it definitely conjures up that image, doesn't it? Of
and particularly that you told me they don't serve a beer. They just serve a cup of tea.
Very disappointing, I know.
Very disappointing.
Yes.
Okay, Alan Sherry, thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.